I'm going to have a wonderful multi-personage chat with three wonderful human beings who are in London as we chat. Staring back at me just now, the first of the three folks I'm going to chat with today is British composer David Osbon. He has composed a great deal of music for the Anglo American Duo. Excuse me, we've got to get that straight. Anglo American Duo.
I think that's quite important.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah.
It certainly is. Timothy Schwartz, the violinist, and Jane Beeman, pianist. Jane is the Anglo side of that duo, and Timothy is the Yankee side of that duo. We'll get there, but just now to kind of get things going. What's going on is we're going to be discussing in this interview the premier CD by the Anglo American Duo, all music by David Osbon, who is looking back at me just now. You guys have just finished a wonderful sort of what do you call that? The live CD release performances in London. You gave a performance at the London College of Music on the 7th. You gave another performance on Thursday the 8th. Same thing at another venue. David, since you're there, first of all, how'd that go? How
terrific. It was. I have to confess, Dan, it did rather exceed expectations. We did them slightly differently. So at the London College of Music, which is where I'm a professor and I'm the associate dean, we geared it more as a sort of lecture demonstration, so that the students were able to get perhaps the sort of insights into the music that just listening to a straightforward performance might not necessarily have given them, and so that was rather modelled on the equivalent launch that we'd done in Philadelphia back in September. And then last night in this central London venue we did a full performance. It was actually the world premiere of the sonata for violin and piano, the Prometheus Sonata, in its entirety, plus the piano trio, and Tim played the solo violin sonata, and that was in a more traditional concert format. But because it was a CD launch, it was a concert plus a bit of a party.
Of course, and by the way, and that's the British way. Let's be clear, shall we?
Absolutely. That's the Anglo part being heavily played.
Thank you. Excuse me for a moment. By the way, was the the performance of the entire CD exactly as programmed on the CD itself? I'm just curious.
No, we didn't do the 5 homage last night. The reason for that being, it's a huge play, but also the 5 homage have been in the repertoire of the duo ever since they started. And we felt that a significant percentage of the people who were there last night will know those works anyway, and we wanted to bring the new stuff forward.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Let's see. We were discussing. You are Professor of Creative Arts at London College of Music, University of West London. Tell me a little more. I'm always curious. I know my professional colleagues are, and the public at large. What is a day in the life of David Osbon? Can you just give me an overview of just your typical day in London?
Well, the first thing is, as a professor, we utilise the term professor for the most senior ranks of academics. We use lecturer for the lower ranks of academics. What that basically means, Dan, is I don't spend much time at the lecture theatre coalface delivering wisdom to freshmen. I deal exclusively with graduate students and with research students at the doctoral level. So that's my main teaching responsibilities. And then as a research professor, I have this sort of double life, one of which is composing classical music, like for the Anglo American Duo, for concert performance. And then the reason I'm called Professor of the Creative Arts is because I have this dark side of multimedia, transmedia, intertextuality activities, that rather stems from my performance rather than my composition side of things. I get in touch with my inner geek and start doing funky things with real-time interactivity.
You just gave me a massive rush to my days at the California Institute of the Arts, peering into Morton Subotnick's lab, into his dark corner of electronic goodies and things. And at that time, of course, it was a huge mystery to me. I thought he was out of his mind, of course. Anyway, that's wonderful. Okay, it's time to bring Timothy Schwartz in. Let's scoot together, and we're gonna chat with Timothy. But Timothy,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
Oh.
And again, intimacy, so we don't lose you. Let me just give you a little overview, and then I'll ask you the same question. It's a silly question, but also very important about, what is a day in the life of people at your level. But Timothy, I mean, a modest debut at the age of 9 with the Philadelphia Orchestra. My jaw dropped. All of your studies have been at the great conservatories, Peabody, Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, and you got your DMA at Temple University. You've been the assistant professor and head of strings at Rowan University. That's in Glassboro. Oops, I suppose I should say Glassboro, New Jersey, since 2015. And you're artistic director of something I find very interesting, and maybe you can touch on it a little bit, this Techno Music project that you have, among so many others. But so it's kind of the same question. What's a day in the life?
So it is fascinating, and at Rowan University, I oversee about 14 violin and viola majors. So these are master's degrees, performance, undergraduate performance, music education, and an occasional Bachelor of Arts. So most of my day is one-on-one teaching, which is wonderful. I also lead the Rowan String Ensemble, which is a conductorless orchestra, and we explore a lot of music a little bit off the beaten path. So last year we did a focus on female composers and minority composers. Just last week we did a concert all of composers that were killed in the Holocaust.
I saw that. I'm very, very interested in this. The Theresienstadt. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a really moving concert we did just last Sunday. And in terms of my day, I mean, in addition to teaching students, as I'm sure you know, music students, it's really like a mentor. So we have a number of international students. We have students from very many different backgrounds. A lot of time is spent helping them get their visas, helping them find housing, helping them obtain new instruments, get sponsors. So it is like having 14 kids in a way.
And by the way, the two of you are conductors.
That's right. Yeah.
Any conflicts or problems? Do you have duel often, or what?
No. In fact, a couple of years ago, Tim premiered my violin concerto, but with the orchestra that he was the conductor of. So we actually shared the concert.
I saw that.
Tim did the Elgar, and then I came on and conducted my piece while he played. So yeah, we can double team it sometimes.
That's the video that I saw. I think it's up on the internet, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And let's lest I forget, we are. I may have mentioned already, but we're speaking about Anthems After Prometheus, the world premiere CD. It's a release. Hang on, let me just find it. It's a release of help. I've got it here. I know. Yes, it's an Albany Troy release from 2018. And also we mustn't forget to mention cellist Lorraine Deacon, who helps in one of David's pieces, Still Waiting for the Revolution. You are certainly coy with your titles, I must say, and we'll discuss those things in a bit. But I'm also impressed by this idea, as you spoke about Tim, if I can call you Tim,
of course,
occasionally, is this idea of the importance, the social importance of music in human beings' lives. And I want to just tell you, and then I'm going to let you speak to it a bit, but I have seen now the young people's opera that was produced at Theresienstadt. Everybody wanted to look the other way for the past 50 years. Now all of a sudden youth opera groups are performing. I forgot. Bill, can you remind me the title? Bildungsbühne or something like that. I've forgotten just now. The idea that parents are now helping their children understand this terror.
Yeah, it is amazing. It really is. And one of the things that I really love about Rowan University, where I teach, is they do have a real focus on social justice, both from the past and the present, through music. So that to me, I think, is one of our callings as musicians, to really use music to promote equality and also to bring to light things that I think are sometimes easy to forget.
Yes, exactly. So we're moving forward ever so slowly. I think it's time to bring Jane in, if I may. We're doing a shuffling of chairs here. And we'll speak to the Anglo American Duet. I have now the pleasure of bringing Jane Beament, pianist, into this image, who happens just by the strangest coincidence to be married to a certain composer that I just finished chatting with. Why don't I talk to you two as the duo, Anglo American Duo? Jane, first of all, give me a little idea of your day too. I know that I remember the Guildhall when I was a student. It must have been in the warehouse district before they renovated the warehouse district. It was this horrible place, run down, hideous little nook and cranny place. It was so medieval in many ways. Now it's a brand new building.
Yeah, there is. The London Wall is at the end of the road, and we are in fact the Guildhall School of Music and Drama is right next door to the Barbican, and the whole Barbican Centre and the area has been renovated.
Yes.
So. Yeah. You haven't been there for a while.
I haven't.
You would notice a difference.
Yes. For example, I went to Trinity College of Music, and it is now ensconced in the gorgeous Naval College
That's right. They've moved
London.
Out to Greenwich.
So
yes.
how is your day? I know you're a staff accompanist at Guildhall School of Music and Dance. Is it dance or theatre? I've forgotten. Music.
It's drama. Yeah.
Drama,
music and drama. Yeah. So yes, I'm on the staff there on Saturdays. I work with a lot of young and upcoming rising stars, really. Some of them are particularly talented young students. In the week, I teach at a couple of schools. I do one-to-one instrumental lessons. And I do a lot of practice, of course, because I work with Tim. And we don't choose the easiest of repertoire. So my day is, like I say, as Tim says, you work with students, and then you can help with this and help with that, not just making sure that their fingerings are correct and that their runs are perfectly even, and have they got everything else that they need to address.
Well, I was just going to say, now it's time to talk. Philadelphia apparently was the magic point at which all three of you met. I know David received his was a doctoral degree at University of Pennsylvania.
That's right.
And so I know you've spoken to this a million times in various other interviews. I'm going to put up the radio interview you did in September for the public radio station in Philadelphia. It's a wonderful interview. But just kind of give my crowd this overview. It's about 9 years now you've been together as a duo?
As a duo, yes. Tim and I, we've known each other since David was doing his doctorate at the University of Pennsylvania. He was studying with George Crumb.
Yeah.
So when David and I were living there, and I joined the Settlement New Music Players, which is a contemporary music group, and that's where Tim and I met. So we've actually known each other for
20
years
now. At least. Yeah.
So at some time, as I understand it, the Colliano Sonata, the violin sonata, brought you together. By the way, I love that piece. I love it.
Yes, and we're actually doing it. We were just rehearsed it today, believe it or not, because we're doing it in Italy again in about 2 months. So
yes, you have a tour.
Bring you back. Yes,
a tour coming up. Yeah.
So yeah, having known each other all this time, and we worked periodically, and then on and off, and then about 10 years ago, Tim was in London with a quartet, and we got chatting after his concerts and said, it'd be nice to play again and to do something. And he said, yeah, that'd be great. Let's look at the Corigliano. Let's. And that was it. So from there, we said, this is great. So we focus on British and American repertoire. Obviously, it's a little niche because we are Anglo. I'm the Anglo half. I always say that. That's my joke.
And you're always first to say so. It's quite appropriate.
And it's not much of a joke, but that's what I say anyway.
There is a hierarchy. After all, we are just the colonists. Well, so what is it? Well, I've got you together for a moment. I'll no doubt have you together again before we're done here. But explain to me. By the way, I had a little chamber music festival here in Santa Barbara. It was called the Santa Barbara Chamber Music Festival. I emphasized American music exclusively, and nobody came. So my question to you is, what is the drive about contemporary music, American, British music, about all of this, and what keeps you going?
I mean, I think there's probably two things. I mean, one, I do think they're just for classical musicians, there does have to be a commitment to contemporary music, and I think I of course know the argument that if there's not a name on the program people recognize, people don't come, but you have to break that cycle
Absolutely.
At some point. And that's not at all to say that we should stop playing Beethoven and Bach, of course, but I just think there has to be a commitment to that.
Yeah.
And I think ironically, certainly in the States, British music and even American music is just not done as much as I think it should be.
Tell me about
and
it.
So that, yeah, I mean that is part of our commitment. I mean, even a standard work like the Elgar Sonata, which we've done many, many times, is not done that nearly as often in the States as say Brahms or Beethoven, and even something like that I think is just really a treasure that.
So if I may speak to colonialism just a little bit, the idea is that we do have to recognize that the American aesthetic is barely 200 years old, let's say, if you get my drift. It's a long, slow journey. In my case, I tried so hard. There's so much tremendously accessible, and I want to speak to that word in a little later in the conversation, but really gorgeous, accessible American music. And it was a tough one. I didn't exactly give up, but you reach a point kind of when you say, hey, maybe I better do some Brahms. So
a little Gershwin or something like that sometimes, because those are names people will come for, and then when they hear other things, then they realize that those are quite good as well.
People begged me to do exactly that, and of course I was slightly younger and refused, so it's my own fault, you see. But what a wonderful feeling for me, and I'm sure for you both, for all of you, to carry on with this responsibility to help people elevate their tastes, their aesthetics. I remember listening to Bernstein symphonies when I was a kid in high school, and they were gobbledygook to me. I could not figure them out. And of course, you listen. All of a sudden, they're Mozart, so on. Yeah. So I think it's time. Let's do a possibly shuffle chairs, but just let me ask the question first, and we'll see. I'm always curious when we'll talk about the blood, sweat, and tears and money and everything else involved in putting together a CD and the years. I mean, it's a tremendous, monumental job to put together a CD that people need to know about. I know you and I and all of our professional colleagues know this, but the public maybe thinks you just walk in, sit down, turn on the mic, But I'm also curious always, and this might need David, about the order of the works on a CD. Who makes the discussion? Do you do rock, scissors, paper? How do you work that out?
That was pretty much David, I think, did decide the order. So we might. Do you want him to come in and talk about that? Who
wants to leave the scene and who wants to live there? Yeah, there you go. Yes. Yeah, let's keep Jane in for a bit. All right, excellent. Look at this. Now remember, tight and cozy. I love the way.
It's even easier because we're married.
Yes, it is, and also I love the way your locks are intertwining. It's quite marvelous. Well, so that's my question, David. For example, the Prometheus CD begins with your most recent, or at least as of the recorded word. How did you sort that out? The order of these works?
Because actually the four works on the CD, they fall into two chronological periods. The Prometheus Sonata and the Solo Sonata Into the Sun are the most recent works from the last couple of years. And the other two works, the Five Homage and Still Waiting for the Revolution, are about 18 years old. I composed them 1999-2000. So the question was, would I put the old stuff together and the new stuff together, or would I actually try and create some architecture over the course of the CD? And because I was really keen to have the piano trio in, I thought, and the last movement is so big and noisy, it really was the movement to finish the CD with. It has a sense of finality to it. So that was self-selecting. And then the other challenge was, where do I put the solo violin piece? So it's, okay, it seemed sensible to start with the big 5-movement sonata and end with the big 4-movement trio. So did I put the 5 miniatures before or after the solo piece? And in the end, I decided to go new, old, but also the solo piece is so distinctive. It helped to break just before the big trio. So yeah, it didn't select itself, and I did have to choose between those in the end.
But in the end, also the logic won out. It's quite a logical idea.
It was quite a logical idea, yeah.
And I love the. If we have time, we'll discuss these in a little bit more detail. But I love that the solo fiddle piece is pulled from the violin concerto. And,
Yes, it is.
And independently exists as a tremendously fascinating, interesting piece all by itself. I found that incredible.
It's had an amazing journey, Dan. It started from the cadenza of the violin concerto, to which I added the opening gestures from the introduction to the first movement. And I actually worked that into one of my transmedia interactivity projects, in which Tim was playing it in Rowan University and interacting in real time with electroacoustic manifestations of the same material being produced in London with video, and a whole bunch of my students performing in real time with it. So that meant that we sort of sketched around it in real time, and then about 6 months later we were all working together in Vienna, and Tim and we then decided that this would make a solo violin sonata. So we did a big editorial job in the cafeteria at Vienna Airport because we were early for our flight, and that's what ended up as the final piece.
Wow, amazing story. And also I'm so glad that you in a sort of rather obscurantist way brought in your bits of your tremendously crazy expertise, and that, by the way, changes my entire approach to listening to that solo sonata. I'm now much more curious to go back and have yet another listen, and it takes a lot of listening. It does. I used the word earlier, and it's overused, and I want to explain how I use the word, because I'm speaking to your music, David, and just in general, I find it, of course, all of your music on this CD is so imaginative, so interesting, so colorful, so full of, all that stuff I can throw at you, and it's all true. But I also like to use the word accessible, very accessible, and here's how I think of accessibility. When not about, it's tuneful and the public will not be upset. No. Accessibility about when something makes perfect sense. To me, as a colleague, as a musician, when music makes perfect sense, its order, its sensibility, its beginning, its middle, its end, that's accessible music to me. And this is what I have on this Prometheus CD of your music. It's all very, very accessible in that sense. But I want to throw you a ringer. Tim, stand by. Don't come in just yet. But David, what I love about composers, I think, now you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is so many secrets, so many devices, so many hidden sub-basements, so many things that you wait to see how many centuries it will take for someone to discover. I'm speaking of the 5 homages. Can you give me first of all, if you would for me, tell me the composers and performer who are part of your homage, why, how, and can you hint at some of the secrets? Because this is really tough. I listened to the homage to Elgar, and I thought, let's see, where is that?
I can tell you that. So the 5. We've got Edward Elgar, Beethoven, Olivier Messiaen, George Crumb, and finally Nigel Kennedy. Now, so Elgar is part of my DNA as a British composer. It sort of runs through me, and it's a voice that's informed my voice just because it's been around me all the time. Beethoven is an aesthetic thing more than anything else, Dan, and this is why it's entitled the Prometheus Sonata and Anthems After Prometheus. I believe, like Beethoven did, to the very core of my being, that music is for everyone. Everyone is entitled to access to and participation in music. It is not for the elite, it is for everyone. And its purpose is to transform the landscape through which we pass. I want, with every note that I write, to make the world a better place because I'm in it. And the only vehicle I have for that is my music. And I get that from Beethoven. And I believe that very, very much. So that's why Beethoven. Messiaen, because of his techniques. And his techniques helped me develop my techniques. George Crumb, because he was my mentor when I did my PhD, and is one of the most unique and original voices.
I think I read somewhere that you were his last student.
I think I was. Yeah. And he continues to be, I think, one of the great voices of the last 100 years.
And the homage, just for if you'll allow me for a moment, the homage to Messiaen. I understood right away somehow. I mean, I just really connected with I thought, of course.
Yeah, and in fact, that's perhaps the most obvious one there, Dan, because it does sound like the last movement from the quartet for the End of Time. Now, if you go back to here's one of those little tricks for you, mate. The Elgar homage, the arpeggiated figure in that is taken from, is very heavily based on a figure from the Elgar Sonata for violin and piano.
Bingo.
Obviously with my notes, but here's the other link. At the end, you've got the homage to Nigel Kennedy, the violin player, obviously, and that's because, if you like, that's the mad sound that's in my head when I'm writing for violin. Sorry, Tim, but but even though it's going at breakneck speed, that homage lasts 90 seconds and covers 7 pages. It's got so many notes on it. But that same arpeggiated figure appears again, but written like for a mad violinist. And the reason for that is Nigel Kennedy studied with the guy who worked with Elgar to play that violin sonata. So it's the same music reworked. So you get little traces, and in the George Crumb homage, there's like a little music box, but as if seen from the distance, which is a little George thing. So there's traces of their music and their personality in all of, but the Messiaen, you're quite right, is perhaps the one that's nearest the surface.
So, and I love the way you use that word, nearest the surface, because music is so sub-basement. There's so much down there, and it's always about discovering, and also in terms of performers and their understanding of work, how many manage to find the deepest. And I'm a conductor by training, so I look for the sub-basement all the time in music. Well, you really helped clarify to a great extent the craft and the art. There's nothing, how some people, amateurs, if I can use the word without insulting too many people, will just dismiss contemporary music as, it's just like art. I could do that in my sleep, throw paint at a canvas, all that crap. And they can't be more incorrect about
no, and I think
art.
What I really hope in all of the works on this recording is that the immense amount of craft that I put into my compositions is underpinning everything that you're actually realizing. The fact that each movement and each collection of movements that make up a work are worked to the point where the architecture that makes a beautiful building means that you can just appreciate that beautiful building for what it is.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really trying to do. Interestingly, last night at the premiere of the sonata, there was a dear friend of mine who I studied to get with at the Guildhall School of Music where Jane works 30 years ago, and we had the same teacher, and he spotted the same tricks immediately. And then that, my friend, is why you are a professor of composition at the Royal Academy of Music. He spotted it straight off.
A high compliment,
yes.
Indeed. Let's just we're sort of touching on the music in the CD, but I just have to ask the question about Waiting for the Revolution, 1999-2000. I listened to it intrigued, and the little. Speaking of an homage, I mean, it's an homage to the American Revolution in so many ways,
it completely is.
To Americanism, if you will, the American whatever it is about Americans, the good part of Americans. Let's be clear: there are evil Americans, as we know, as we speak. But so, still waiting for the revolution. Obviously, there's something more there. Can you give us some secrets?
Well, it was a, if you like, another homage. I just spent many years living and working in Philadelphia, the cradle of the American Revolution. All of the symbols of the American Revolution were there. To this day, I think of Philadelphia as my American home. We go there once or twice a year. It's my America, and everything that I love and respect, I wanted to put into that piece. In the slow movement, the beauty of Shenandoah being viewed as if from a distance, as if through a mist, right through to the energy and the dynamism of downtown inner city Philadelphia, where we lived, right pretty much behind the Academy of Music, and all of that went with it. The slightly crazy stuff.
The very crazy
stuff. The very crazy stuff. Trying to get all of that in and saying, look, you alluded to this earlier, actually, Dan. Your revolution started a couple of hundred years ago. It's got to keep going.
Yeah.
Going. You're doing great. Keep fighting back.
I've heard that
to power.
I've heard and read that historians are looking at the present time as very similar to the time just before the American Civil War. That things are that worked up, that volatile, and of course volatility can lead to wonderful apotheoses, if you will. So I'm waiting for an apotheosis, and in the end, I trust my people. I trust, even though we've been dumbed down considerably since I was in high school, a deliberate attempt, in my view, to dumb down the intellectual level of human beings. I trust that in the end we'll be okay. So thank you for your support from your side of the pond. Listen, as a team, I think why don't we get Tim back in, if you don't mind, Jane?
I don't mind.
So I'm going out. Go out that way.
Okay.
And then comes in this way.
Sure.
Okay. There we go. And I'm going to try and wind it down here. I see we're at about 30 minutes, so I do have to wind it down. But just can you give me an overview, or not an overview, but you've been all three of you have been quite a team. It appears to me for some time. So it's an obvious question. So you've just had the premiere of the first CD. I know that musicians never let moss grow under their feet. So tell me, if you will, anything at all in the works, any even vague plans for the next 5-year artistic period?
You can take that one, Tim.
Yeah, well, in the immediate future, we do have several concerts in Italy, and then some others in England in January. And then Jane and I are playing again in the States. We have concerts in New Mexico planned for April, and then we've already got things for 2020 in Philadelphia area. So we'll definitely be keeping busy on that. And, hopefully maybe we can talk David into writing some other stuff and put out yet another CD. So.
Well, I think you've answered the question as best you can in the circumstance of having no idea what the future will bring. Have I forgotten anything that you're dying to tell the world about?
I'm going to get a bit of promo in here, Dan. Right. I recently completed a commission for an orchestral overture for the Susquehanna Symphony Orchestra in Maryland, and they're going to be premiering that in March of next year, March the 9th.
Yeah,
and I'm very pleased with that, and it also has Elgar references in.
Really? Yeah, I don't believe it. We'll see. By the way, keep me posted, please. The whole idea is.
I'm very excited about this piece.
Okay. Well, so let me do. Now it's my turn to do a little plug. This interview, lots of videos, the radio interview, excerpts because there are wonderful excerpts from Anthems After Prometheus CD that are up on the internet. I'm going to bring all that together, plus where people can click to buy the CD, all of that good stuff together at performingartsreview.net. That's my plug. And the whole idea of giving everyone that I speak to, everyone whose CD I review, giving you your own sort of independent page is for this very reason, to keep in touch, to keep updating. My job, I'm not a journalist, I'm a musician, so my job is to keep the public aware all the time of what's going on. So I'm very grateful to have been able to be involved in this particular project, reviewing of this CD. What's going to happen is, just so everyone knows, the process is that I'm going to put up the video interview. We're going to conclude here rather quickly, put up the page, get everything up there, because again, as I mentioned maybe earlier, the number of people visiting the website is really exponentially growing. And there's no reason for them to sit around and wait for me to come up with my 3 or 4 paragraphs. So I want to get all of this good stuff up. It's a visual society. We're in a real paradigm shift these days. Get that up, and then I'll follow with the review. It's been just a great pleasure. Let's get Jane in the background. Can Jane step in between the three? Let's get all quite cuddly. I do hope, I pray to Zeus, or at least Prometheus, that we are able to have been able to keep everyone in frame. It's a bit tough, but I hope that's going to work. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you three. It looks like a gorgeous day. Oh, it's evening, isn't it? So it's not day.
No, definitely evening.
So that's
all
all
artificial sunlight day.
So I was going to say it looked like a sunny California day, but in fact it's artificial. Anyway, congratulations on the CD premiere past couple of evenings. I'm looking forward to getting this up. I know so many people are going to be so interested, and the video interview I'll put up almost immediately on Facebook. It's amazing. Great. It's just amazing, as you all know, I'm sure, the tremendous power of these social media. It's marvelous to get the word out.
Yeah.
So, I think we're done. Anybody have any last critiques or moments of?
Just say to thank you for all that you've been doing as well. We know it's a very difficult task to keep doing these sort of things. So thank you so much, for championing new music and classical music in general. So.
And somehow managing to gab at people for a half an hour. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're done. Many thanks indeed. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you, Dan.
Right on.
Great.